You ever notice how sometimes characters suddenly spring to popularity? How someone who is barely a blip on the radar for months will pick up a huge support base practically overnight? It can happen for a few different reasons. A new game announcement could take a no-hoper who already had a following and propel them into relevance again. Or maybe a leak that had been correct so far could seem to pencil in someone whose following then explodes into something bigger, even if said leak also had some unanswered questions. Or even something like a well-designed hoax that gets so many people to consider the character in the context of Smash that the supporters keep going even long after it's revealed to just be fan-made. But this episode, I want to point out one trend that happens a lot. I've yet to see anyone in the Smash community recognize it or give it a name until now. I want to talk about something I like to call the forbidden fruit effect. There's an appeal to hoping for something that doesn't feel very likely. It's like reverse psychology in a way. When we think it won't happen, we start to romanticize it, think of what it'd be like if the impossible became possible. Something or someone we'd only have given a passing glance normally starts to become exotic and interesting. And so when an unlikely scenario like that actually happens, it blows our minds. New doors are opened, rules are broken, and the collective fandom spends the next several days recovering from shock. It feels kind of rewarding to see the forbidden happen, if that makes any sense. And if you supported someone the others derided for being a no-doubter, and they actually made it, the feeling of vindication, there's nothing truly like it. It's always fun to root for the underdog, but there are times that we as a community go too far. Sometimes we cling too hard to the forbidden. Sometimes we jump to conclusions, assuming that if one so-called rule has been broken, then they must all be off the table and now anything goes, even though that's rarely, if ever, actually true. Sometimes we get so caught up in what we want to see happen that it becomes an obsession that clouds our judgment and distorts our views and predictions. We've all been there. I've been there before. And sometimes, the appeal of supporting one of the quote-quote forbidden is so strong that we jump on board just to say we did. Bandwagons spring up, groups of people who are only on board just to be seen doing so. It skews our perspective, makes it difficult to tell just how well-liked a character is because we can't tell who genuinely likes them and who's only there because it's the cool thing to do. Then you get people who see this facade of prominence and assume it must mean that character is a frontrunner, regardless of what their actual situation is like. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that builds higher and higher upon itself. And the longer it lasts, the harder it is to separate the truth from the hive mind who really wants their wildest dreams to be true, or just wants to be seen saying it. Today's challenger is, perhaps, the single biggest example of that in Smash 4 speculation. A single spark of news, fueled by the success of his game, spread into a wildfire. I'm not writing him off, but I want to try to set the record straight. Because just like the tale his adventure tells, this night's chances aren't quite what they seem. Shovel Knight hails from the indie title of the same name, a 2D platformer that deliberately invokes the style and aesthetics of many classic games of the 1980s. A brave adventurer who once roamed the land righting wrongs, his weapon of choice is a shovel with a sharpened edge that lets him wield it like a polearm while still being able to dig stuff up. Despite the simplistic setup, Shovel Knight's main campaign actually has quite the compelling plot. Years prior, he traveled alongside Shield Knight, his adventuring companion, partner, and very heavily implied love interest. That is, until a dungeon crawl in the Tower of Fate went south, they accidentally unleashed an amulet of evil power, and as they fled for their lives, Shield Knight vanished. So distraught over losing her, Shovel Knight gave up adventuring and vowed to live his days in solitude, until the Tower of Fate opens up once more, and a mysterious sorcerer known as the Enchantress begins to conquer the realm, heralded by an eclectic group of 8 known as the Order of No Quarter. Compelled into action once more, Shovel Knight takes arms against the Order to right their wrongs, reach the tower, and just maybe save Shield Knight and redeem himself. With colorful visuals, masterful level design, and a catchy soundtrack, Shovel Knight has become a poster child for indie titles and successful crowdfunding, propelling the upstart Yacht Club games into the spotlight and granting their new signature character a boatload of cameos in other indie projects. Calling the game popular would be an understatement, after 1.5 million copies sold. Combined with its timely release in June 2014, the so-called Blue Burrower was on people's minds as DLC talk started and the Smash Ballot opened up. And then, something happened. Yacht Club Games' company Twitter encouraged their followers to nominate Shovel Knight in the ballot. To be honest, I don't blame them for doing that. It was a chance for them to reach out, to gain more exposure in a way that didn't feel forced. And it's not like there weren't a bunch of other companies and developers doing the same thing. As someone who's also trying to spread awareness of my own creations, I get it. But I don't think even they expected the explosion it resulted in. Suddenly, everyone and their cousin was talking about Shovel Knight and Smash. It reached far beyond even the fans of the game, rolling a bandwagon who wanted to support the brand new up-and-comer. There were even clamors for Smash needing an indie rep, even though they don't pick things based on what they represent. And that exposure built on itself even further, with speculators seeing everyone talking about Shovel Knight and assuming he must have been a frontrunner, feeding the Smash fanbase's self-made prophecy even further. But then Shoves was passed up on, and now we're wondering what this potential Switch port could bring. So if we want to get a read on what his chances are now, we need to cut through all the talk, all the hype, all the outcry, and try to look at this objectively. Because based on what we know about the selection process, Shovel Knight needs the Smash Ballot. Yes, I'm aware Nintendo has helped out Yacht Club Games in a couple ways. Yes, they helped Shovel Knight's game get published over in Japan. Yes, they even had an official amiibo made, the first indie character to get the honor. But despite that, I don't think that necessarily means we should jump all the way into calling him a lock for Smash. It's like saying there's fire just because it feels like there's smoke. Thing is, Nintendo's been strict about third-party characters getting in. Every one of them so far has been iconic and highly recognized. It's a trait that seems to be important for third parties, and I'm not sure Shovel Knight is there just yet. For all the success and all the accolades, he's still a minor leaguer with a short legacy and one title to his name so far. I just don't know if that's enough yet for Nintendo to give him the nod on his own. But the Smash Ballot might offer a way around that, a chance to overcome falling short of those traits. Because while his iconicness might be a question mark, Shovel Knight does have enough unique abilities and moveset potential to stand out while feeling true to character. Would he be chosen if the Switch version does add more Smash Ballot characters like some have speculated? I don't know. And with how many other highly supported choices there are, I'm not very confident, but he has a plausible chance at least. But hey, stranger things have happened, right? What would Shovel Knight be like in Smash? The key with these character concepts is to try and capture the essence of who each character is and how they would fight. Shovel Knight harkens back to classic platformers like Zelda 2 and the original Mega Man series, patient platformers of sorts that encourage players to plan out their routes and take things slowly and deliberately. Ideally, we'd want him to feel similar to that in Smash, using his abilities not to overwhelm his foes, but wear them down and outlast them just like he wears down bosses. Kinda like how Mega Man fights, but less annoying since his go-to is a melee weapon instead of cherry tapping you with buster shots. Having only one game does have its perks when it comes to figuring out a look, since it means Shovel Knight has one consistent appearance to rely on. They could add a few ornamentations to his armor to go with Smash's fancy HD visuals, but between the sprites and artwork, there's a reliable base to work with. Worth mentioning that he's supposed to be pretty stocky, so he'd probably look closer to his cameo in Yooka-Laylee than the slimmer design Smashified made. Sorry guys. Alternate colors are just as easy to figure out. Over the course of the game, Shovel Knight can have 5 additional sets of armor forged that each offer different effects, and they're pretty much perfect palette swap material. They could also throw in the green set used by player 2 in co-op. Then I guess they'd do as they pleased for the 8th color. Looks are one thing, but how about something with a little more substance? Next, we need to figure out Shovel Knight's playstyle, stats, and other attributes. As previously mentioned, it'd make the most sense to have his playstyle be about surviving and outlasting his opponents. Keep in mind, turtle does not mean campy and boring. It just means he's defensive by nature and built primarily to stay alive. His proficiency would be using the shovel blade to keep enemies at arm's length and out of their comfort zones, limiting their options while keeping all of his. Zoning using disjointed hitboxes rather than projectiles, similar to Marth and Corn. So on to stats, and, well, those speed stats don't look very exciting, do they? Shovel Knight moves at a slow and deliberate pace in his game, so it makes sense for him to be the same way in Smash. It may not be as flashy as someone who can run in and pressure opponents, but slow does not mean dull, and defensive playstyles have their merits. It's like a pitcher's duel. Every big conversion or kill becomes that much more important because it could be the one that decides the game. On the bright side, there's some good things here. A weight of 106 would make Shovel Knight tied with Rob as the 10th heaviest character in the game, while also being smaller than everyone heavier than he is other than Wario. And a good initial jump and high gravity would give him surprisingly good vertical movement. And with below average fall speed that'd make him less susceptible to combos than nearly everyone else in his weight class. Some characters have gimmicks within their movesets that let them pull out strange and unique powers in battle, like Kirby's copy abilities, Marth's tipper hitboxes, or Lucario's aura. But with Shovel Knight, what you see is what you get. He needs no such things. But what he does need are moves to fight with, though. And fortunately enough, we can start with attacks we've already seen him use. His standard swing of the shovel blade is a forward tilt waiting to happen. His down tilt could have him swing near his feet and unleash a short-range spark based on the drop spark technique. Doesn't even need to be at full health. Then the charge handle would slot right in as a forward smash, reminiscent of Meta Knights in being powerful yet having 20 or more frames of startup, but being quick to release out of a charge. His forward air would be the standard shovel swing again, performed in the air instead. But his down air, come on, you knew this was coming. The signature shovel drop would have a long-lasting hitbox, and on contact with an opponent or shield, Shovel Knight would bounce back upward a ways and maintain his momentum, aiding his ability to land by covering below him while also making the move difficult to punish out of shield. But for balancing reasons, it'd have quite a bit of landing lag if he hit the ground during most of it, meaning you'd have to be smart about it and not just carelessly throw it out, or you'd get punished. So while we're admittedly limited by Shovel Knight's exact moveset from his game, we can expand on that by adding original attacks as long as they still feel like a natural extension of who he is and use his canon moves as a point of reference. His jab could be a single forward thrust, a one-hit jab like Roy's that lead into other stuff at various percents instead of having a self-contained jab combo. His up smash could have him swing his shovel up and overhead like he's heaving a mound of earth over him, and his down smash could have him slam the shovel down in front of and then behind him. We could take advantage of his game's generally comical tone by making his neutral air have him strike a heroic pose with his arms raised above his shoulders, and you get the gist of it, right? Put it at about frame 6 or so with an extended late hit, and you'd have a combo breaker and get off me move that'd help out his survivability. And his up air could be an upward stab that references Link's up thrust maneuver. It originated in Zelda 2, part of Shovel Knight's inspiration, and it'd have some nice kill power high up above the stage. As far as his grab game goes, we don't have a lot to work with. What I could see happening is that he'd have a frame 7 standing grab like almost every other weapon wielder who doesn't have a tether for their grab. Maybe his back throw could have him lift and fling his opponent away. Or maybe he'd swing the flat back of the shovel at them and knock them away for his forward throw. And then there are potential taunts. His victory pose whenever he begins or clears a level, the bring it pose he takes in a piece of official art, and one where he'd pull a random piece of treasure out of hammer space, examine it for a second with his other hand on his chin, then put it away. Our quest has one trial left. What would Shovel Knight use for his specials? Fortunately, he has just the tools, or relics, for the job. At neutral is Chaos Sphere, the first relic in the game because it's the one you start with. It's a bouncing green ball of magic energy that ricochets off enemies and walls and gains speed every time it does. It may not deal much damage with each hit, but let it loose in cramped quarters or in the middle of a bunch of enemies, and you get what can only be described as pure chaos. This would be pretty easy to transfer into Smash with little more than an aesthetic upgrade and a few tweaks like increased startup to match that of other fireball-type projectiles. With mediocre speed at first and only 3.5% damage per hit, it wouldn't be much of a threat at first. But every time the sphere would strike an enemy, obstacle, or shield, even Shovel Knight's shield, it'd bounce back with increased speed. In doubles or free-for-alls, this little projectile could be a truly chaotic presence. But in most cases, it's just there to use occasionally to tack on a little damage or open opponents up. Shoves is the disjoint zoner, not a projectile one. Shovel Knight's side special would be a little more hands-on, the Dust Knuckles. In-game, these massive fists allow him to plow right through enemies and blocks of dirt like they're nothing. But if you don't have something to hit, you just kind of sit in midair uselessly. It's another attack that can be worked into Smash with few changes. The first input would be a single punch with no forward momentum, but if it hits something, it'll allow you to press B again for a second punch that sends Shovel Knight forward a battlefield platform's length. In addition, the first punch would have a brief stun before its knockback kicked in to allow easier combos into the second, and the second punch would grant intangibility for most of it to get you through harm just like in its source game. As a way to clear distance and escape tricky situations, the Dust Knuckles have no equal. Just be careful about how predictable you get, because they'd be quite punishable, the second punch especially. But what do we have as far as recovery goes? For Shovel Knight's up special, how about we use the Propeller Dagger? A blade with a built-in motor, its original use was to essentially be a horizontal air dash that also let you deal damage. To be more reliable and make shoves not have an awful vertical recovery, we're going to adapt it a little. In Smash, the Propeller Dagger would come out fast in Dragon Punch style, knocking opponents away and clearing space as you broke for the ledge. Unlike originally though, this version of the dagger would start out going straight up. But wait, you could hold left or right while moving to curve its trajectory by up to 30 degrees in either direction. As a recovery move, it would go a distance comparable to Marth's Dolphin Slash, being alright if flawed, and make Shovel Knight's recovery better than his bad airspeed would suggest. With a decently strong hitbox at the start, it'd also be a nice out of shield option, but it'd be weaker as he traveled, so plan accordingly. Finally, his down special would be the War Horn. Slow to start, this move is risky to use. You pull it off and it damages everything in a large area around you and is sure to give you some much needed breathing room. The War Horn in Smash would also start slow, taking upwards of half a second to activate. It lasts long enough though, and blowing the horn would create a big hitbox with range comparable to Marth's sword on all sides, dealing heavy damage to anyone caught in the blast and instantly destroying any projectiles and objects that are too close. It'd work best as a means to clear space if anyone's getting too close for comfort and they commit to a poorly spaced attack or a predictable projectile. It's designed as a whiff punish of sorts, but it'd have additional use in free-for-alls and occasionally doubles, where there are more things to keep opponents distracted. So those four were actually really easy to pick out. I've seen other Shovel Knight concepts elsewhere, and many of them had those exact four relics for their specials. But for his final Smash, I'm going to go against the grain with a move I've decided to call Shield and Shovel. Using the power of the Smash Ball, Shovel Knight would summon his beloved Shield Knight a platform length in front of him, and they'd both dash to each other's starting positions to begin their attack on anyone caught between them. From there, they'd start a flurry of attacks Triforce Slash style, Shovel Knight swinging his shovel blade and Shield Knight bashing the enemy with her signature shield. Finally, Shield Knight would raise her shield above her head and Shovel Knight would bounce off it, hang in the air above and charge up energy in his shovel, then plummet downward for a devastating blow that send their foes flying. The two knights would celebrate their short-lived victory for a moment, then Shield Knight would leap back off stage and out of sight, to cheer on Shovel Knight the rest of the way. This is what Shovel Knight could bring to Smash. A brave soul spurred back to adventure, whose trusty shovel blade and collection of relics give him everything he needs to save the day. A true knight to his very core, he endures many trials and suffers many blows, but by standing strong and wearing his enemies down, he emerges victorious. Shovel Knight's greatest strength is his survivability, lasting until higher percents than most and using his good vertical movement and escape tools to prevent long combos or conversions, ensuring he is the last one standing. He can also zone using the Shovel Blade's disjointed hitboxes, playing a mid-range game that walls out anyone who tries to approach without a weapon or ranged attacks themselves. But such a fighting style is not without its downsides. While his damage output is decent, Shovel Knight lacks long combos and burst damage options of his own, meaning coming back from a percent deficit would be a daunting task indeed. Furthermore, his poor horizontal mobility and weak projectile would give him issues against hit-and-run speedsters who could dance around his hitboxes and punish, and give him a hard time reaching his ideal range against any projectile zoners who don't mind moving around. Ironically enough, Mega Man would give him fits. There's a surprising amount to work with between his in-game skills and natural extensions of his character. It's proof that Shovel Knight could work in Smash, but I'm highly skeptical of his actual chances. Despite all the talk surrounding him, his nature of being a newer third-party face from a small-name developer likely limits him to the Smash Ballot, where he could easily be overshadowed. But who knows, we've seen weirder things happen. Or maybe we could see an indie counterpart to Smash down the line and he could be a headliner there. Our next challenger can relate to having limited options. They're another character whose fate, for better or worse, relies on the Smash Ballot. Fortunately for them, they may be one of the more likely choices from it. To anyone who's made it all the way here, please consider checking out my Patreon. I really enjoy the chance to share these character concepts, but fighting through pain all the time doesn't make it easy. Any way you can help out, even just spreading word to fans of these characters, goes a long way. And if you can pitch in a little, there are rewards to be had. But for now, our quest is done for the night, and it's time to sit by the fire and rest.